Good morning. Hopefully everybody's doing well. Hope everything's good with you and yours. And everybody's staying safe, practicing safe practices, washing your hands, doing the face mask and that. I hope everybody is well and will stay well. Anyway, I want to apologize for the low lighting conditions. It's early in the morning and the sun's not up yet. But it's not as much about the lighting conditions as it is about the message. So this is a basic idea of concept, to lay out the concept of what we're talking about when it comes to what is suspected banking and land registry manipulation, which might affect the way that the mill rate is affected, because if they're overvaluating properties, then that would overvaluate taxes that are necessary and cost of services, etc. And here we are in this situation where we're asking for a simple service, which is come and do an evaluation. It's prejudicial what's been going on, highly prejudicial against the taxpayer mostly, but also against us. And also it looks to be the basis of a system that they're not willing to look at, let alone correct. So that's the thing we're trying to do here. So the basic concept, everybody knows how properties are evaluated, well, hopefully. Basically, when it comes to evaluation of its value, when you go to buy a property, for example, whether it's commercial, industrial, or residential, whatever, even a piece of land, if it's a building in specifically, though, such as a rental property or a business, when it comes to employment, because these are all tied to loans and banks and insurance on those loans and with the banks, etc., as we all know, because that's mandatory as part of getting a mortgage anywhere in this fine country of ours. Okay, so how are they evaluated? Well, you go to buy a property, let's say a house for $300,000, and you go to buy that property and they say, well, we're listing it for $300,000 because that's what we think it's worth. And you go to get it and you say, well, wait a minute, just before you go to buy that property, if you're smart, you say, I would like to have a property assessment based on minimum building code, and that is a standard. That is the standard that's used for everybody as far as an evaluation as actual property value. Because, for example, if you do that and the evaluation comes back that, well, there's actually $100,000 worth of repairs that need to be done in order to bring it to code, that $300,000 price therefore then drops to $200,000. Because that $100,000 is necessary to bring it up to legal standing as a building at that value. Because if you go and try and get a mortgage on that without that being in place, they will not mortgage it, because unless you put up the money for that $100,000, because the real value of that property is based on that assessment, which is why every building in Ontario, based on municipal law, municipal act, and the Ontario Building Code, which means it doesn't matter what region you are in, all rules apply to the same. And that's for any building structure, so industrial, residential, or commercial. It's a simple evaluation. They come here and it's a checklist. This is what you need to maintain building code, and this is what's not correct. This is where you correct it, and the evaluation's been done. Once the evaluation has been done to identify it, they follow through with the corrections, which is why there's a deadline. Now, most people who are obeying of the law would do this naturally. When you go to buy a property, they would have it assessed and have this done. And these things are not being done because look at the way this property had changed hands. And it's in the public record. But anyway, let's get back to this. So they come in and that's how you do proper evaluation. Now that's the way it should be done. That's called an actuarial evaluation. We all know about that. And if you're smart, that's the way you do business. And that's the way the banks insist on doing business, because they can only put out the money for the real value, and the insurance on that property has to be based on real value. So again, this is where insurance is tied in. Both of these things on their own, if you have something that puts either the mortgage in jeopardy or the insurance in jeopardy, such as an unsafe condition, such as not maintaining building code, that would normally put that, if that was you or I with our home and it got really bad, especially where you got a work order levied against you and you were not cooperating and doing all these things, your bank would by rights call in that mortgage. If you presented unsafe conditions at all like, and did nothing to correct them, your insurance company would take action. So we have to ask ourselves, why aren't they taking action here? And the appearances, again, willing partners. Because this is the second way that you evaluate property value. I say, hey guys, this is my property. And I see this later, even though I only paid $10 for it, you know, even though that's, no, actually I think, $5 for 5 of them or whatever, plus tax. Even though I paid, okay, let's call it $1.50. I paid $1.50 for this lighter. I say it's worth $1 million here, and I hand it to you, and you go, "You're right. That's worth $1 million." Now, normally under circumstances when it comes to land deals, so I come up and I go, "Well, that property's worth $300,000." You go, "You know what? I agree. Let's just call it $300,000." Normally, the banking in that would be in there to say, "Wait a minute. No, this is the system that says no, that's not correct. We will only insure it for this much, only mortgage it for this much." That's called the checks and balances that should be there. But instead, when you have willing partners where the bank and the insurance comes in and goes, hey, you know what? Yeah, we need to have assets go up. We need monetary value of properties to go up to make it look good on paper because we need to charge higher taxes. They might not think of it that way, but they're just trying to impress the boss even maybe, eh? Who knows? But that's why the real checks and balances are there. Anyway, the bank and the insurance company comes in with these other two partners that go, hey man, yeah, we're just going to call it 300 grand. Let's do it for that. And these willing partners that are usually checks and balances go, you know what, that serves our purpose too. So yeah, why don't we? Then all of a sudden the system slips into a thing of where we are here because this is a check and balance. It's a simple system. They should have came here. First of all, this landlord was operating for 2 years improperly and unlawfully, and unlawful equals illegal, which means that's a criminal offense. He was in the practice of negotiating unlawful contracts because the only license that is, the only application and tenant agreement that is legal in the province of Ontario, which has been that way for several years, is the official residential contract, standard form. So if a landlord who is a registered real estate agent, certified real estate agent, and active, goes to a lawyer who is trained by the Law Society of Law Society and all you, Osgoode Hall and all you other people who are responsible for training these people and overseeing the profession, he goes into one of these people and he says, hey man, I need you to draw up a lease for me, you know, to use with my tenants. That officer of the court should have handed him a residential lease, which is the only standard form, because that's the law. But instead, this person took money to draw up a document which they claim, which he's putting forward as a legal, lawful lease, and telling people and negotiating contracts based on that, telling any lie he wants because it's covered. And they even put in the lease that you will hold us harmless and blameless even if we knowingly did this to you, which is illegal, unlawful, and not even sustainable in this situations. But it does say a lot, especially about the lawyer. And Osgoode Hall, again, the problem is who is in charge of information and overseeing. Anyway, well, we finally got the right guy. His name is Ian Kerr at the Municipal Affairs and Housing. He is the regional manager for the Western region, which is down to London, which means regional manager means that because there's Oxford County and there's Waterloo County, or Waterloo region, Oxford region, or counties and all that, which are under, however, whatever regional government there is between Kitchener, Waterloo, and London, many different things considered regional municipal government. Call it whatever you call municipal government, wherever you are. This is the guy. Okay, so He's responsible. He's basically Shane Turner's boss. Okay, I'm pretty sure he's Tony Bruto's boss. Tony Bruto is the one who is the team leader in London. So again, we told him, go watch the video, and I encourage you people to watch the video, because what you're seeing there when you see them doing what they're doing is they're breaking the law. That it's a criminal offense. Repeated criminal offenses, because they're not allowed to, and that's in our opinion, based on our evaluation of that, the context. Now that we have the context, the proper context of those videos. And again, thank God for whoever invented video, because if we did not do what we did in documenting this, there would be no proof. But now you can go and see for yourself, but understand that when those, and again, the Municipal Affairs Minister and Ministry is responsible for firefighters. Anybody who is garnered under the Police Services Act. So again, municipal inspectors, fire inspectors, okay, everybody who is in charge, who is overseeing this process. So when you have, and I will say this publicly, under what's going on here, A1 Cool signed off on this furnace. We would go to the TSSA, and we are saying we want publicly TSSA to come forward and do a full investigation, because this man signed off on this furnace and it's obvious it's not to code. Okay, and he tried to sign off on it again. And he came here without protective gear, and he was very belligerent. I've got, we would like to make a formal complaint, but we want to make sure it's going to go somewhere. Okay? But the problem is, and let me be a little defensive of the man for a while, because again, it's the industry. This is the industry's responsibility, because you guys like to tout how, you do it by the nature of the profession and all that, and it's to code, which means to code. It means to building code. So when you build a stairs, more than 3 stairs going up to a deck, it automatically comes with a handrail, because that is building code. It has got X number of space for the treader, X number of space for the footer. It's there by design, because that is tested and proven and true as the minimum standard. You can exceed it if you like, but it must meet the minimum. And you're having situations where it doesn't meet the minimum continually, and that's because the profession knows, even though the standard is there, it's the same with everywhere else. The only way you get the work is to do cutting around the corners, because those are the ones who get the work. And if somebody in the profession goes to stand up and go, hey, what the heck, guess what? I'm sure it's probably much the same as we're seeing here. Anyway, we're back to the land thing, because when there's a lien, such as a work order, because again, Mr. Ian Kerr, your job is to come and evaluate the property, and your people were to come and evaluate the property, and no person is allowed to misrepresent or disrupt or tamper with evidence in an investigation. Your people are doing exactly that, supposedly on behalf of the taxpayer. Well, our opinion differs, because we can see how this is turning out. Anyway, so our problem is there's too many people going around saying, yeah, that's what it's worth, and there's no checks and balances. So when that happens, mill rates go up, taxes go up, cost of services go up, and they're asking for more money. On the back end, the way this should have happened was when he was discovered. The way this should have happened is, if you want to have a rental property in Ontario, you must provide your own certified housing inspection to say it meets minimum building code, because that's the standard, and that way everything else works the way it should, which is as repairs happen, the tenant is supposed to go, hey man, we need this is going on, and the landlord determines, well, it's repaired, because the distinction is it is repaired immediately because it's the property of the landlord. If the landlord feels that any portion of that should be paid by the tenant, he asks the tenant, well, that's part you're for, you try and negotiate it. If it doesn't come as a negotiation, that's what landlord-tenant is for. Okay? The standard is to avoid landlord-tenant. And had they done their job, right from the moment they caught him, which is to do an evaluation and say on all the properties and go, here is what you need to bring it to code. All these properties would have been brought to code because what are they there for? They are there to bring it to code and make sure every time it gets touched or goes to their system, oh, this should be at code. Well, this was where it was at code, so where are we at now? And who's responsible? Okay, that's how the system's supposed to work instead they're working the system. Anyway, there is a new landlord-tenant thing because they're going around. This is actually round 2 of the first one. They're just finishing the job because they didn't think that Carrie and us would associate. We're an association. We're protecting each other. So of course we helped Carrie out, and she helped us out by moving in together. You know, Denise is officially trying to do it, but they're preventing it. Again, because they want Carrie to be destitute, so she's leaving too, so they can do the same thing here. First of all, you got a problem, get rid of the problem. That problem is us. Look at the way they utilized all the resources of the government in order to use a work order as a prop. And even before we got to landlord-tenant, and they used a few more months of playing with us, messing with us, using the law to do it, using our disability against us, worked up my PTSD, and then used an unlawful act to, as whether it was me, their perception of me losing it where I was going to harm myself, which is not what I was doing. It was clear I was making a stand. I was making them come do the dirty work, which they did. But, and you know, anyway, unlawful act. The landlord's operating unlawfully. They're operating unlawfully, protecting them. There is no law that they can hang their hat on for any of this. And when they brought me in, they even broke the law because part of this willing partner thing is with the hospital and the police. Because in order to do a proper assessment for psychological assessment, they must do a full physical. They do not do a full physical. They come in and go, we're keeping you, sign off, bye. Less than a minute, no medical exam. And in my case, I have still not had a capacity hearing, even though I was in front of when they invited me down to the courthouse, under the guise of helping me, and then assaulted me and dragged me into their system for 2 years in an effort to try and shut me up and label me criminal. Where a court said, yes, they invited a constitutional challenge, but provided no means or assistance in doing so. Worked instead on the opposite because they wanted to bury it, and they had full control of that case. Because it was Region of Waterloo Courthouse, Region of Waterloo manager, and again, what happened between the regional courthouse, the police station, and the Wellington Detention Center? That's a different county, people. The coordination that's working again. Look at the willing partners. You can get around anything. Anyway, they've got a new one up. They started a new continuation. The old one is here. Let me just see just a sec. I'll tell you the number because I'm going to be. The next one's going to be the letter, the notice. Okay, so notes. The matter in landlord-tenant regarding 100A Marshall Street, where this all started, where Marshall Street Tenant Association was formed and where Carrie Mills tried to give evidence. She was totally traumatized by not only with the actions of the landlord for the last 2 years, but also that led to just recently, July 18th of that year, her longtime roommate and friend, and you know, all of our friends, John Lichty, had a heart attack. He was having, well, he didn't have a heart attack, he was having heart problems, which he ended up going into the hospital for, in the ICU, and then then that's a whole other story, which led to his death, and then the circumstances that we found out about afterward, and also with the interference of the office of the lawyer, whatever, advocate, I guess, who is interfering, and again, that's run by Municipal Affairs. The coroner's office, who is also run by Municipal Affairs. Are we seeing a pattern here yet, people? That's the Municipal Affairs part. Housing is the distraction, and they're even failing there. Anyway, the LTB SWL 32448-19 was regarding 100A Marshall Street. They now have this new one, which is a continuation of them assisting, that using the law to assist them to get rid of the problem, which is us. And that one is, LTB SWL 41948-20. That's this one that we just got. Okay. They're saying they want us to show up or have a video hearing on November 4th. Without preparation, to be able to get subpoenas to make sure that the proper people are subpoenaed. We're not giving assistance in anything because they're just trying to ram this through, and procedurally, just like they did the last time. But they've got all the evidence on file from that original filing. So I told Mr. Ian he's got to look that over and do a full review, because there's not only an error in judgment, it's an error in law. And I defied him. I challenged him. I didn't defy him. I challenged him to tell us what part of the Landlord Tenant Board, Residential Tenancies Act, whatever you want to call it, any of this, that they were able to evict us on. And there was a stay that was achieved by Denise that all of a sudden disappeared, which is documented through the Community Legal Services contact. And Denise Duval was a Community Legal Services recipient, which is when she went into them for their assistance, and they just said, well, here's what you can do, but we're not going to represent you. Why? Isn't that how it's supposed to work? Because again, this is a series of willing partners that work together to preserve what's happening instead of doing what they should. So, again, they're saying November 4th they're going to do this video conference. I am telling Mr. Ian that, no, I think there's a better use of that time. You've got their legal people's attention. You've got their owners' attention for a purpose on that date, including the Atlas Property Group, which oversees a lot of properties here. And it appears that Atlas Property Group, by getting the license at 98B and 100A, knowingly or unknowingly, doesn't matter, but I say knowingly because there's a work order in place that neither of them honored. Says the standard for the building code, and they're still getting around to honoring it. They've been going around, because of my pressure, they've been going around doing a little bit by bit, but they still haven't honored it. It's still outstanding, which means the order is clear. Go read it. Anyway, there's supposed to be a lien against it. They're preventing the lien from getting put on the property, because by putting that lien on the property, it would automatically be registered on the mortgage. It would put that mortgage in jeopardy. And it should be a simple matter of being able to take that instrument, because it's past the date, and go down and say, here, I need to register this, and they go, well, that's 20 or 30 bucks or whatever it is, and have a nice day. That should be it. And it's the Ministry of Municipal Affairs that runs land registry as well. So is this mortgage and property and banking fraud and insurance fraud? Is that why they have the banking and insurance industries married together? Because now they can easily, there's supposed to be checks and balances against each other too. Chartered banks are chartered by the Crown. You have to question yourself, who are the banks working for? Because for everybody knows, for the last, they're governing your mortgages, they're overseeing your mortgages, and if it was you or your neighbor who has a mortgage that did any of this stuff, they'd be down your throat. They would be taking your property, the whole bit. But when it comes to these willing partner scenarios, because same thing happens in employment. And again, Municipal Affairs oversees inspectors at employment, where you have the Westray Act, where an entity who oversees it can be held accountable. So what happens when you have a system where the person who's overseeing it is also the person who's checking into whether they're doing it, and they're using this obstructive kind of behavior? So technically, and again, even with my employer, that explains a lot of things, because with my employment situation, again, the employer was allowed to operate for several years while not having a proper health and safety policy in place until after I brought the attention to it. And I'm not taking any credit I'm just stating fact. I don't care about that. What I care about is that it stops here. The system of checks and balances is to find out what's going on and expose it and then deal with it properly. Not sit there going, hey, that's a great idea. But we need to ask ourselves, because here we have, they're coming forward with another, everybody's been asking about this LRT thing. Are you aware that some of those properties were bought up by the charities? Ray of Hope purchased several of those properties. Again, how did they do it? Did they go in there and go, yeah, that's what it's worth, here, let's just sign the papers? Or were proper evaluations done? So how do we fix this? Number one, you must have act on every single public building, because again, it's the government and it's the municipal affairs that is responsible to oversee. Every public building is required to meet a minimum building code. So now we know why they get them. When they're done, they just let them sit there. They put hydro in them. They just run them into the ground and bill the taxpayer lots and lots of money to do it. While the building goes down to a certain point, then they use the building code and say, well, we got to condemn it. Then they use the money to tear it down. They clear the field and everything else. And then when it's prepared and everything's good and the taxpayer's taking care of that part of the bill, all of a sudden they want to sell it. So they got this boondoggle in Kitchener. I suggest what we do is pay close attention to these contracts, these municipal contracts, these banking contracts, because they say they're open for business. This is what they mean. It's about the banking contracts and the way they do their business. And if this is Regional Manager Ian Kerr, you are to check out every single region and municipal area within your domain. We are asking that you search all work orders that have been put into effect, and then how many have been registered with the Land Registry Office that are not followed up, and how many have not been followed up. We ask that on behalf of the taxpayers immediately. The other thing too is this hearing on November 4th, I'm putting to you that your time is better spent. You got their attention. You come here. You only need, matter of fact, under the law, you don't even need notice to come into these properties to do an inspection. But hey, Wednesday is November 4th. Today is Friday. I'm sending you the letter today, inviting you to utilize that time more wisely by writing or getting in touch with the landlord right away and say there's a little change of plan, but hey, both of you guys need to come here and be present while we do these inspections, including the general manager, property manager for Atlas Property. And they can bring their lawyers, because when you're done doing the inspections, if they are not to code, you need to be arresting both those people, because they put forward false documentation with the municipality in the application. And again, full investigation, full review. But we are asking that November 4th, you need to do your job on behalf of the taxpayer. It's a simple evaluation. So you bring whoever you need to, and we are asking no less than a full evaluation on 100A Marshall, because the evaluation was me pointing out a few things. I could have went on. It's not my job. My job was to say, see, there's a problem here, now come and evaluate. And I did that, but every single thing that I pointed out was an infraction, which has not been dealt with yet. So 100A, we're asking for a full assessment of 100A and a full assessment of 98B, because on the grounds that under the work order on 100A, they mistakenly included the fence for 98B. The mistake was they included it with the property 100A, but the evaluation is correct. It is not to code. That's their subterfuge that fell in on itself, and is only provable because we documented, because we took the time to look. So as I said, Ian, Mr. Clark, Doug Ford, you're so big on not gouging people and getting to the bottom of people who are trying to take advantage. Well, this is on behalf of the taxpayer. How much money is being wasted? Because again, they should have come here and done these evaluations. We would have been done. we would have had no need for landlord-tenant. We would have gone on paying our rent, and we would have gotten what he promised us, because he promises the moon. He's a certified registered real estate agent who goes out promising the moon, you know, verbally and even on the contract. It's what it is, which is an illegal selling illegal contracts, negotiating illegal leases, being protected by the people who are supposed to be checks and balances. Well, the only checks and balances going on here, the check coming from people like Theo into the balances of people like Shane Turner and others. And whether misguided by direct, idiot policy of government, the bottom line is this: it is a misuse of taxpayers' funds to have them come here repeatedly the way they did. It's for the sole purpose of using as a prop. Because go watch those videos, but the thing you need to understand is this: he had post-dated checks, including the check for June 1st, which he claimed in landlord-tenant. We didn't even try and pay. That was part of the reason of unpaid rent, which, if it's not the code, it's unlawful rent, so therefore there is no rent owing, which means that the amount of unlawful rent paid to date, okay, 100A Marshall Street for the time we were there was $28,800 of unlawful rent based on the law. Here at 98 Marshall Street, you're talking, where is it? Well, there we are. Okay. For when Carrie and John were living here together, you're talking a total of $28,800 was paid in unlawful rent. From the time that John died, which was August 2019, to present, is $1,200 at 14 months at $1,200, which is $16,800, but we got $3,600 sitting on the fridge upstairs in money orders that they've refused to pick up, because again, they're creating this situation the same way they did with the rental check. Oh, it's unpaid rent. No, it's not. Especially if they do the evaluation, we find out these places are not to code. The law is clear. And no person includes the ministry. No person shall misrepresent. That includes Shane Turner. That includes Shamir Mehta. That includes Allison Hensall. That includes Ian Kerr. That includes Stephen Clark. That includes Doug Ford. That includes the Progressive Conservative Party of Ontario and Canada. That includes the Liberal Party of Ontario and Canada. That includes the New Democratic Party of Ontario and Canada, because we went to every single one, including the Greens. Tried to approach the Greens. And always the same thing. Either we're not getting a response, or the response is that's a legal issue. And you know what? You're absolutely right. Anyway, so the total here to date, so actually 16,800 minus the 3,600 on the fridge is 13,200. So you add the 13,200 plus the 28,800, and that is $42,000 in unlawful rent paid to date at this property. In any other terms, that would be what, grand larceny or something like that? But this is their business plan. And when you have an entity such as Atlas Property Group, because again, they've been dancing around, they got lots of money, they use the procedural issues of the system. It's their playground. We've had, let's see, it was Theo Papadopoulos, then Atlas Property Group came in just before we were evicted from 100A. When we came over here and we were trying to assist Carrie with her situation, we're saying, hey man, this basement's leaking October 28th, before she even moved in here, because we weren't going to be moving in here. That was an act, you know, we were under the impression that there was going to be a stay till the last minute, and then they removed me under the guise of an unlawful arrest, while they're sitting there taunting me in the hospital with factual, relevant, in-time, real-time information to try and get me to flip out. You know, where they put me without a proper, again, you know, willing partners, right? But anyway, you know, we've gone, Mark Koenig is the property manager for Atlas Properties that was assigned to oversee these properties. So all of a sudden, when we started saying, hey, there's a problem here, Mark Koenig of Koenig Holdings we're given a letter saying he's the guy now. That Koenig Holdings is the guy. So we're dealing with Mark Koenig, which is, again, documented. They just continued. They were empowered and continued their campaign of. The whole point was to get everybody out. Carrie was to be left destitute so she couldn't afford it, and she'd just leave on her own. And the campaign was done through the whole time. So, but it's funny because they go Koenig Holdings and they go through their harassment and that. We start getting into legal issues. They finally get a paralegal, so they put up Lisa Nate on as a paralegal. They start flipping out, like we start going human rights and stuff like that, and they're just using, again, oh, well, you told Theo, but now there's Mark, so you got to tell Mark. So we tell Mark as a matter, oh, now we got Lisa, so you got to tell Lisa. Lisa's actually sending letters going, you have to tell all three of us at the same time. You know, anyway, we get back around to landlord-tenant, and whose name is at the top of the list? Atlas Property Management, Property Group, Inc. So, again, playground, just playing with people. So now Atlas Property Group thinks they're going to show up at this hearing, and now we have to do subpoenas because all they have to do is have one of their flunky managers show up with the information and say, well, this is the case. So procedurally, they're trying to do that. Well, we've been trying to get this into human rights and getting a pushback from Human Rights and Legal Support Center because they know what's coming. They know it's here. They've been preventing this for 17 years, but I'm glad, now, because now we got the cohesion. It's Municipal Affairs Minister. Anyway, we invite you to come here and do your inspection. We hope that the taxpayer joins us in that call, that it's better use of taxpayers' money, especially right here and now, because you've got these people who have put forward that misrepresented that these properties were to code. That go look at the rental license application. When you see Allison Hensall in that video, and she's giving us, as she's handing us and explaining it to us, the violations to the building code, she's kind of haphazardly laughing, going, well, we might have already given it to him. And in fact, they had. They had given it to him. So why would he, again, where's the mystery about why he didn't do what was on the order? Especially when a couple weeks later, whatever, they wrote a letter saying we consider the case closed. All of which is illegal, improper, because they're not allowed to give any favor, or they misrepresented. They got what they wanted, though, which is it's a prop. They got us all up in airs. They perceived us as the threat, and perceive us as the threat, and they're getting rid of the threat so they can carry on. Because again, 98B, when getting the public record, it is clear what is going on here. There is a failure, abject failure in the municipal affairs has lost sight of what their job is. And it's tied to the banking, which is municipal as well. And you have employers, a lot of employers have employment situations tied to banking contracts, insurance contracts. The money that they make off of look at the money they made off of not doing it here. And money they make, I'm talking about what they're charging back to the taxpayer. And if they're not doing a proper top property assessment, that means it affects every single taxpayer, every single law-abiding citizen, and more importantly, every single mortgage holder in the region of Waterloo. And if this is being carried on by Mr. Ian and the municipality, that's regional manager, that's every region between here and London. Am I making my point? So we hope you join us. Mayor Jaworski, you are to tender your resignation immediately. Steve Ross, lawyer for the region of Waterloo, city of Waterloo, whoever the hell you are to tender your resignation immediately. Brian Larkin, you have directed your police officers in an unsafe situation to be participating in unlawful acts which have caused harm upon the community. You and your training officers, who are also run by the Municipal Affairs, because Police Services Act is under direct control of Municipal Affairs Act. Police Services Act is only one part of that. So if you have a complaint against police services officers, including any police services officers who have complaints against their own board, if you do not have the Minister of Municipal Affairs as the top person in your complaint that you're complaining against, it's a ruse. Because then they only look at what's under the Police Services Act. This is how they keep the cap on the system. This is how, and again, we have to ask ourselves with Westray Act, if he's under control with how these investigations go. Just like this investigation, this is tampering with evidence. This is misrepresentation by the people that are imbued with the power to get to the bottom of it. The system is corrupt. This is evidence, and again, I'm putting up the links on the other page. I'll see if I got enough room on here, but I'm going to put up the links to what we believe is a pattern of behavior across the Commonwealth. Grenfell Fire, what's going on here, and what's going on in Australia, and it's 60 Minutes Australia, a couple stories that they ran. And it's funny because the one where they caught the banking was done by the Five Eyes, which is Canada, New Zealand, USA, and Australia, and I forget who the third one or fifth one is anyway. But anyway, yeah. So I mean, they're all the ones that participate in our security. It's a banking system, people. You know, you go into the banks for the last 10 years, and they're going, "Hey, you got to invest in the Pacific Rim. That's where the money is." Well, when you did that, you were taking your jobs out of America, out of North America. You supported our own downfall based on free trade. Gave them the economic engine to do it. Based on, hey, you're going to do better. Yeah, you did. Yeah, you did better, didn't you? How are we now? And now they get to do it again, transitioning back, because it's all just a game to them. Chartered banks in Canada have been implicated in Ponzi schemes and banking fraud around the world. Florida. You know, but they get to do these deals where, oh, well, we claim no wrongdoing. Gee, I wish we had that deal. Anyway, time for you to step up and do your job, Mr. Ian. And it's time for us to do a full judicial review as to what's going on here, because it's obvious, and we are bringing our case forward because I told Mr. Ian, no, we're not going to your hearing. We will be here, we're going to be here ready for an inspection, because all they have to do is get in touch with the landlord, have their representatives here, present, right, which again, they've been notified. They can notify them now with more than enough time. They have more than enough time for the landlord to notify each of the residents of 98A, 98B, 100A, and 100B that on Wednesday, November 4th, there will be a housing inspection. 24 hours written notice is all required. Matter of fact, they don't require any notice, especially under these circumstances, I believe. But this is what I'm asking Mr. Ian, and telling Mr. Ian that should be done. Is that if they want a better use of their time and taxpayers' money, they will be here on November 4th with the lawyers and their owners, and they'll perform those inspections. And immediately upon those inspections, if any of these 4 properties are not to code, the manager of Atlas Property Group and Mark Koenig and Theo Papadopoulos, who are all here present with their lawyers, are to be arrested on the spot. Because that's misrepresentation, fraud. You know, they just tried to defraud the taxpayer again. And we'll be here ready for the verdict, because again, the only thing going forward that is going to be judicially fair and unprejudicial to the taxpayer and us is the determination. Asked and answered. Other than that, if that's not going to be what's happening, we're already working to try and, again, keep putting our application in before the Human Rights Tribunal. That's why the letter that I'm going to be reading in the next one is actually the letter we sent. And hopefully you'll go look at it. Anyway, I hope everybody's well. It's gone a little bit longer than what I thought. I'm just trying to explain where we're coming from. So again, it's time to get some willing partners of our own to stand up and make sure that this is stopped. Ian Kerr and Stephen Clark. I've also said, based on what we found, that you are to immediately cease all matters of us in the landlord-tenant board, etc., until you do a full investigation and a proper determination. We are asking for a full review of that file for 100A because, again, it started there. LTB SWL 32448-19. And this one, SWL 41948-20, is just a continuation of that. Anyway, hope you join us for the letter. It's the ultimatum letter, and I'm starting with where I said press send to Ian Kerr, Kerr, Regional Manager, Southwest London Regional Office. And when it says Regional Manager, again, that means every region every municipality of the Western region, this man oversees. So at the very least, he has to make sure they're not doing this anywhere else, because this comes down to the training for the job, or oversight of the job, or just basic understanding what their job is, because your number one job is to maintain building code. There's an 800 number that they put out for the sole purpose. So if you are a tenant or a landlord, there's a resource there. They have all these resources, but the actual people doing it, they're just playing with it. It's checks and balances. Checks go in their account, balances keep going up, right? The paper, the money on the paper, that's not an actuarial evaluation. That's just willing partners going, hey, yeah, you know what? Right now, that property next door, 100A, has over $300,000 if all fines are properly applied. And meanwhile, there's also a corporate fine of $50,000 per offense on top of it. But the order that's currently in place, and it says until it is completed, so they could do 99% of it and have one or two things out, and it's still not completed. So in effect, it is not completed. But hey, that's what the evaluation's for, isn't it, Mr. Kerr, Mr. Clark? Because again, it's going to be prejudicial to walk in there based on your guys' word, because it's wrong. Anyway, that's our opinion. Let's see what yours is, because like I said, your choice. As part of human rights, we are required to give them the opportunity to correct their behavior and their situation. This is it. We're choosing to use a better choice of our time, which is to proceed with this human rights case at all costs. It's 4 disabled people and 1 deceased. Anyway, I guess we'll find out what happens, eh? God bless, or whatever you believe in that keeps you protected. Please wear a mask, follow the protocols, keep yourself safe, stay safe, be well, and we'll see you on the other side of this, hopefully.